Hey, what's going on, guys? Hope you all are doing well today. Elliot here. Welcome back to The Fragrance Well. For today's video, we're going to talk about what I would consider to be 8 of the most masculine fragrances I have in my cabinet. This is not going to be a ranked list. I'm just pointing out 8 of them. And let's also remember that when it comes to masculine versus feminine versus unisex, whatever, in terms of the overall vibe of a fragrance, it's going to vary from person to person, potentially based off of their experiences and their scent memory. So for this list, this is based off of my scent memory and my experiences. I'm just pointing out what I think to be masculine, even though I do think there's plenty on here that many would agree with me on if they have experience with the fragrance. But again, that can vary depending on, where you grew up and et cetera, et cetera. So let's go ahead and get it started. Pretty straightforward video for today. But before we do, as always, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and please hit that bell icon and enable notifications so you can be notified when I upload new videos. Let's get into it. All right, first one's coming from the house of Amouage. This is Beach Hut Man. Amouage Beach Hut Man. So this one here, now I haven't smelled Beach Hut Woman, so I don't know how that changes what they did differently with this overall DNA. Would love to find out at some point, but I have to see it. But anyway, this one here, spicy mint, spicy green minty fragrance, has a lot of galbanum, which is a bitter green smelling resin, loads of mint, dry woods, other resins. There's a lot of myrrh in this as well, which is a favorite note of mine, kind of acting like this resinous glue for everything in the fragrance, and just kind of this overall dry feeling. For me, it does overall have this kind of barbershop style vibe while not having the traditional barbershop ingredients or notes in it. And traditionally, barbershop fragrances were fragrances that were overwhelmingly made for men at a certain point in time. So naturally, being a guy who grew up with barbershop fragrances, dad and grandfather wore barbershop style fragrances, I'm gonna associate that with a masculine fragrance vibe. So once again, from the house of Amouage, this is Beach Hut Man. Next one's coming from the house of Francesca Bianchi. This is going to be Lost in Heaven. Francesca Bianchi, Lost in Heaven. Why am I losing focus there? Anyway, so what's interesting about this scent, if you look at it specifically on Parfumo, first of all, it is marketed as unisex, and also many people say this fragrance is unisex. That blows my mind because I don't associate this with the way a woman would smell at all, but in different parts of the world, maybe this is something women might wear more frequently. But as far as I'm concerned, this is going to be a spicy, woody, slightly animalic kind of resinous fragrance. Do I get, maybe there's some slight leatheriness in here. Nothing in particular really stands out other than those kind of features. I personally can't pick out a particular note that much in here, but I do know there is like an interesting note of beeswax, which is something that can give off animalic touches in fragrances. I just remember there are some pretty interesting listed notes for this fragrance, but I kind of think of this as a old school, not necessarily barbershop, but just that old school, ultra hair on your chest, masculine style fragrance that is specifically geared towards date night because the way the spices and even just kind of the underlying sweetness to counter the boldness of this fragrance that this fragrance has. It just makes it like a date night fragrance for an older guy, in my opinion. I like scents like this. Granted, it's not one I necessarily might wear a ton, but this is a very masculine fragrance, at least to my nose and based off of my experiences. Once again, from the house of Francesca Bianchi, this is Lost in Heaven. Next up, coming from the house of Dior, we have got Fahrenheit. Dior Fahrenheit, the classic men's fragrance from the late 80s from Dior that is still being sold today. Fortunately, we lost all the lovely flankers, which I would have loved to discover. The only one I have is Parfum, but it is what it is. This is definitely a style of fragrance that is, no longer like the most popular in terms of men's fragrances. But this one definitely has that traditional masculine feel to me. My father wore this fragrance, so naturally I'm going to associate that with masculinity. It's got leathery accords in it, has a little bit of a gasoline smell. I don't think too many women want to walk around smelling like gasoline. Vita leaf is like one of the featured notes or ingredients in this fragrance, along with the leather. There's spices, there's florals in this. This one is just think traditional, a lot of notes, masculine style fragrances, or fragrances that were marketed to men that had spices, but also a gentlemanly feel, cleanliness, but heaviness as well, with notes like leather and maybe oak moss, dried woods. This fragrance is kind of one of Dior's takes on that style of fragrances. I love scents like this, but you know, they're not going to be seen as modern masculine. But anytime I smell a DNA even close to this, I'm going to think a man is wearing it. Once again, from the house of Dior, this is Fahrenheit. Next one's coming from the house of Hermes. We have got Terre D'Hermes. Hermes Terre D'Hermes. This is just the original eau de toilette. All right, so does anybody smell this scent and think that maybe a woman might wear it? I certainly never got that feel from this fragrance. Dirty, ashy, orange flavoring scent, grassy, smoky vetiver, flint, adding to that smokiness, and sprinkled with a very nice benzoin that really comes out more so in the dry down. I've always thought that this is a man scent. I loved it at first sniff. This one could be a little bit tough, but I would think that fragrances that have more of the traditional masculine edge is actually a little tougher for a lot of people, and it's part of the reason why the lanes have shifted in terms of what's popular for men's fragrances. I think a lot of them are just easier for more people to, smell. It's more palatable, so to speak, versus those more old school styles. It's just not the norm anymore. It's just not what's popular in terms of a masculine scent. But this one, albeit definitely different from those traditional masculine scents, I still think this overall smells like a man. But that doesn't mean that vetiver is not a scent that women can wear. I've smelled a number of women wearing like vetiver style fragrances, and honestly, it smells great on them. Once again, from the house of Hermes, we have got Terre D'Hermes Eau de Toilette. Next up, we got one from the house of Issey Miyake. This is Nuit DC Parfum. Issey Miyake Nuit DC Parfum. So this is a more modern take on a masculine fragrance, but still overwhelmingly masculine, at least it is to my nose. So this is mainly a leather and vanilla fragrance. There's a spicy feel to it. I don't remember if there were spice notes given, but it has a spicy feel. I do know there's a little bit of like a grapefruit feel in the opening, mixing with that leather and that vanilla, which gives off a really interesting spicy feel to it. The vanilla in this is not ridiculously sweet. It's just kind of the sweet counterbalance to the leathery notes that are in this fragrance. That's overwhelmingly what you get. It has this gentlemanly feel. It has this slightly clean, almost barbershop feel. Doesn't necessarily smell like a barbershop fragrance, but it has that kind of texture to it. So when I smelled this, I immediately thought like, yeah, that's definitely a man's fragrance, at least as far as my experiences go. Overwhelmingly masculine, even though it is done with a more modern take on what you would put into a men's marketed fragrance. Once again, from the house of Issey Miyake, this is Nuit DC Parfum. Next one's coming from the house of Mont Blanc. This is going to be Legend Eau de Parfum. Mont Blanc Legend Eau de Parfum. Granted, a fragrance I don't wear that much, but I really just love the scent DNA makeup of this. I think this is a great one from the house, and I'm not the biggest fan of Mont Blanc. I don't hate them. I'm just, I just don't think they make the greatest fragrances ever, but they do make solid ones. Still got to check out the latest release from them. This one here overwhelmingly is kind of relatable to Abercrombie & Fitch Fierce, which I never owned, but I certainly smelled, because if you went to an Abercrombie & Fitch store anytime in the 90s, you smelled the Fierce DNA. Definitely smelled it, and it brings up memories of that. So that's maybe another reason I have this. But overall, I do think this is a masculine scent DNA. And in a weird way, it does remind me of a barbershop take on Fierce. I can't remember if the original Fierce necessarily had that in it. Again, I never owned it. But there is a little bit of a cleanliness to it. And overall, I do see this as a very masculine but modernized take on a masculine fragrance. At least that's how I experience it. Once again, from the house of Mont Blanc, this is Legend Eau de Parfum. All right, next up, got one from the house of Tom Ford. This is going to be Tobacco Oud. Tom Ford Tobacco Oud. I should have mentioned this before, but I guess I kind of touched on it with the Lost in Heaven fragrance. You know, many of these fragrances, particularly niche, are marketed as unisex, even if it's widely agreed upon that no, this is more of a feminine fragrance versus more of a masculine fragrance than it is unisex. This one I do believe is marketed as unisex, as pretty much all the private blend fragrances are, or at least the majority of them. I could be wrong, but I do believe this is marketed as unisex, but I don't see how anybody could smell this and think like, oh yeah, that's 100% a woman's fragrance. I mean, this is very masculine because it has a nice booziness, which doesn't necessarily make it masculine, but the tobacco in this is a little bit dirty. There's a spicy, woody element that has an overall kind of dirty leather jacket bad boy feel to it. Some people have said this is animalic. I don't really get that, but it does have this funk to it, especially when you first spray it on. It does calm down once the fragrance dries down, but overwhelmingly I see this as a masculine fragrance. Not necessarily in the traditional sense, but I think a man would be wearing this if I smelled this in the air. Once again, from the house of Tom Ford, this is Tobacco Oud. And last but not least, from the house of Parfums de Marly, this is Haltane. Parfums de Marly, Haltane. All right, so I've said it plenty of times. Many others have said it. Many see this as a more masculine take on Inicio's Oud for Greatness, which most people I think see as a unisex DNA, really leaning slightly feminine for some people, and this is kind of the masculine answer to that. Has that woody, musky, luxurious, woody, musky smell that is synonymous with Oud for Greatness, but there's a little bit more of a heavy leatheriness to this one. Some aromatics also by way of lavender and clary sage, giving it this clean feel, but that added leather I think just takes it in the masculine direction a little bit more. I can't remember for certain, but as far as I know, while this is in the men's bottle, this was pretty much marketed to men. I do believe Parfums de Marly is one of those houses that to this point is still pretty much giving a distinction on their fragrance releases. The other style bottle for them being marketed towards women and this one being marketed towards men. Now, if you ask a counter representative, they'll probably say many of them are pretty much unisex, and to be fair, some of them are, but I think this one definitely leans more masculine in my opinion. Once again, from the house of Parfums de Marly, this is Haltane. All right, guys, that is gonna do it for this video. Let me know down in the comments below, what are some of your most masculine fragrances that you have in your collections or in your fragrance wardrobe? I'm certainly looking forward to seeing what you guys have to say. Thanks again for watching all the way into the end. Really do appreciate you guys. Please remember to be well and smell well, and I'll see you in the next episode of The Fragrance Well. Have a good one.